Today we are starting our very first lesson of this semester, and we're going to be talking about how to add and subtract integers. And notice that it says no calculator. Okay, so that's important. We're starting off pretty basic this semester, and we're doing that for two reasons. One is to kind of like ease into the semester, not overwhelm us too quick with algebra. The second is this is probably one of the most important topics because I know that you guys have seen last semester in your algebra class, so many times you miss points on quizzes and tests, you make mistakes simply because of one positive and one negative symbol. Okay, a sign can ruin an entire problem for you in algebra. And a lot of it comes down to not really being very good at adding or subtracting positives and negatives. Okay, so I promise you guys that if you can perfect this one skill right here, you are going to see a dramatic improvement on your skills and on your scores this semester. Okay, so this is very important. You really, really, really want to try to get better at this. So, kind of already hinted at it, but we're talking about integers today. So it's a really fancy name, but really we're just talking about whole numbers. And we're talking about whole numbers that are both positive and negative. So we're not talking about fractions, we're not talking about decimals. But when we throw negatives in, it gets really tricky for people. Okay, notice it every year as a math teacher. People make mistakes on simple addition and subtraction with this stuff. Now, there's several methods that you maybe have been taught or that you can use to do a problem like number 1 down here, 5 minus 12. I am going to strongly suggest, though, that you guys visualize and use the number line to add and subtract integers. And I'm going to give you a copy of your own number line, and I'm going to let you use it on your first quizzes and your first exam. Okay, so use that to your advantage. So we're going to use the number line here, and I'm going to make a note of that. Use the number line. And I'm going to highlight this too because this is a big deal. Now, here's how we're going to use the number line to do something like this number 1 here, 5 minus 12. Use 0 as your reference point. Now, if you are ever adding in your problems, in your examples, you are going to count to the right on the number line. Okay, so I'm going to make a note here. If I'm adding, I'm going to count right. Just like with adding then, subtracting, you won't count right, you will count to the left. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing. If I'm subtracting, I'm going to count left. So that's it. It's a pretty basic concept, but it really does help so much when you're going to figure out what these problems equal. So let me show you how to use that idea to solve number 1. And yes, you cannot use a calculator. I get it in real life. You have a calculator on your phone, you can always use that. But for purposes of preparing you for the I-STEP, when you take the sophomore I-STEP, there's a part of it that you can't use a calculator. Same with the SAT, the ACT. Your first quizzes in this class, you can't use a calculator. On your first 2 exams, there will be a portion that is non-calculator. So you really have to be able to conceptualize this stuff and do this without a calculator to rely on. Okay, so when I'm doing 5 minus 12, you start at the first number. So 5 is the first number. I'm going to locate 5 and start there. I'm subtracting 12, so I told you to count left if you're subtracting. So I'm going to start at 5 and count 12 spaces to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I land at -7, so that's my answer. Okay, number 2, I've got a couple of things going on here, but I'm just going to read it from left to right and start with -8. So that's here. the first thing I want to do is add 15. So I'm going to count to the right 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And that puts me at 7. Now I need to subtract or count to the left 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that puts me at -2. Okay, for number 3, they've kind of complicated a little bit, and it's really just things, in my opinion, that just try to confuse you. For example, the parentheses. Those are not important. Okay, so I like to write it without the parentheses because they really don't matter. There's nothing inside the parentheses besides a plain number, so they don't matter. The other thing I notice is that in between the two numbers, there's 2 signs, a minus and a plus. That is confusing to me, and you should fix that. You either have to decide, are you adding or you're subtracting if there's a minus and a plus. Now, if there's one of each, the negative sign always takes over. So I'm going to make a note of that. The negative takes over. And I'm going to highlight it too. Okay, so in the middle, I'm not even going to write the plus sign. I'm just going to write the negative because it's going to take over. So I'm really just trying to do -1 minus 6. So I find -1, and I'm going to count to the left 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that puts me at -7. Same thing with number 4. I don't like the parentheses. There's really not a need for it. I'm going to rewrite it without it. This time in the middle, it's 2 negatives, not a negative and a plus. If there's 2 negatives, and a lot of you already know this, but double negative, that just turns into a plus sign. So I'm going to make a note of that too. Double negative, that equals plus. So if it's all positives, I don't even really need the number line. 5 plus 22 is 27. Number 5, same idea, and maybe you can look past the parentheses. I don't like them, so I'm going to rewrite it. Again, I see a plus and a minus. It's okay, the order is different. The negative is still going to take over. So that's still going to be -6 minus 14. Now, here's where the number line may kind of do you wrong. You're going to go off of the number line on a problem like this. But personally, I think the visual of it, and if you can visualize the number line in your head, it might help you figure this out if you don't have a calculator handy. You start at -6, so I'm right here, and I need to subtract or count to the left 14 spaces. Now, obviously, I'm going to land way over here. And I know that my answer has to be negative because I'm all the way to the left. You just got to think about where that would put you. And truly, it's not that different from being at 6 and counting this way, 14. And I bet a lot of you could do that. If you're at 6 and you add 14, you land at 20. So this is the same idea, except I'm going to land at -20. Okay, for the next one, it's the same kind of concept. You start at -7, and we need to count to the right 28. My answer is going to be in the positives because I'm all the way to the right. I use 0 as a reference for this. So like, if I'm at -7, and if I count 7 spaces to the right, I land at 0. Well, I have to count a total of 28 spaces. If I've already counted 7, that leaves me 21 more to count. So if I count 21 more, I'm going to land at +21. For number 7, I see a double negative, and I'm kind of just choosing to ignore the parentheses, but that's going to be the same thing as -4 plus 30. So you're starting at -4. Same idea, you guys. If I count 4 spaces to the right, I'm at 0. Well, I need to count 26 more, so that's going to put me at 26. The last one, you might get something crazy and go way off the number line, but you're going to start at 5 and count 68 spaces to the left. If you count 5 spaces to the left, that puts you at 0. Let's see, 68 minus 5. That would leave me with 63 more spots to count, which is going to land me all the way here at negative 63. Okay, so that's your first video lesson. Typically, you would use the entire class period the next day then to practice this, instead of having homework problems like this assigned to you to do on your own.